The towering spires of Zyra Prime rose into the violet sky, each crystalline pinnacle glinting with the fierce pride of a people who had known only conquest. In a grand courtyard stretched before the council chambers, warrior women marched in disciplined formation, their boots striking against polished stone. The sound reverberated through the air like thunder, an echo of the Empire's unyielding might. Commander Lyra was no stranger to these echoing halls. Tall and imposing, with a mane of long silver hair braided tight against her scalp, she carried the regal bearing befitting her rank. Her armor, an alloy of starlight-forged metal, clung to her muscular frame, reflecting the swirl of violet overhead. She strode with confidence, shoulders squared, as if her footfalls alone could split the stone beneath her. Inside the high council chamber, an assembly of Zyran leaders sat upon raised seats, carved from black obsidian. Their gazes were stern, their expressions carved from the same unyielding resolve that had guided the Empire for generations. Supreme Matriarch Lyra, draped in regal robes, lifted a hand for silence. "Commander Lyra," she said, her voice echoing, "we have received intelligence from our scouts in the outer sectors. A small planet, known among their people as Earth, displays a potential for resource exploitation. Our preliminary analyses, while limited, suggest that Earth's defenses are primitive by our standards. We must decide whether it's worthy of a grand conquest or a simple subjugation." Lyra bowed her head in acknowledgement. She had heard of Earth. Most Zyrans deemed it an inconsequential speck beneath the Empire's notice. Yet, the Council's decision suggested otherwise. "I stand ready to serve," Lyra said, her voice resonant. "What is your command?" Lyra paused, exchanging measured glances with her fellow counselors. Then her gaze returned to the commander. "We dispatch you, Commander. Scout the planet discreetly, measure its worth, and decide if a full invasion is justified. We trust in your judgment." As the chamber fell silent, Lyra pressed a fist to her heart in salute. "I shall not fail." Outside, the sky turned a deeper violet, as if foreshadowing events to come. Lyra ascended the ramp to her personal scout ship, the Orion Spear, which glimmered in silver splendor. She took her seat at the helm, her co-pilot, Lieutenant Saris, nodding in respect as she secured the controls. With the hum of a well-tuned engine, the sleek craft lifted off from Zyra Prime's surface, bearing its commander toward an unknown corner of the galaxy. While stars rushed past the viewports, Lyra contemplated Earth. She envisioned toppling cities with effortless might, for that was the way of her people. Duty had always guided her steps, unwavering and absolute. She had never questioned the Empire's cause. The possibility that her upcoming experiences on Earth might shift her perspective never once crossed her mind, not on that fateful day. But fate often thrives in the realm of the unexpected. The invisible web of destiny stretched beyond Zyra Prime, beyond the glinting hull of the Orion Spear, to a small workshop on Earth, where a humble mechanic by the name of Jack was about to be thrust into events that would shake two worlds to their very foundations. High above Earth's atmosphere, the Orion Spear glided through darkness, guided by Lyra's expert hand. With the subtle flick of a lever, she activated the stealth shielding, a feature designed to mask the ship's energy signature from prying detection systems. Although rumors suggested Earth's technology was outdated, the Zyrans never underestimated a foe. Caution was ingrained into every fiber of their militaristic culture. Yet caution alone could not prepare them for the cosmic debris field that unexpectedly converged on their flight path. A swirl of meteorites and jagged shards of space dust impacted the Orion Spear before Lyra could maneuver away. Sparks erupted on the control panels, throwing the cockpit into chaos. Lieutenant Saris shouted warnings, her voice crackling amid malfunctioning systems. Lyra's knuckles whitened on the controls. She fought to regain balance, to stabilize the spinning craft, but the vessel spiraled downward, drawn inexorably toward Earth's gravitational pull. Sirens wailed, and red lights flashed across the cockpit, a crimson strobe of impending disaster. "Brace for impact," Lyra roared over the alarms. She had no choice but to cut the engine, redirect all remaining power to shields, and attempt a controlled crash. The ship tore through the atmosphere, enveloped by an inferno of superheated air. The night sky streaked with brilliant orange flames. Below, in a quiet stretch of farmland, Jack leaned against the hood of a beat-up truck. He gazed at the stars, as he often did, dreaming of possibilities beyond his small corner of the world. An orphan from a young age, he had learned the mechanic's trade from a kindly old man who once employed him. Hard work, battered overalls, and hands perpetually smeared with engine grease had become his routine. On this night, his dreams of the cosmos took an unexpected turn. A bright streak tore across the sky, far more intense than any meteor he had ever witnessed. It thundered overhead, trailing sparks of fire in its wake, until it disappeared beyond a line of distant trees. The ground trembled, a low rumble that sent a flock of birds scattering in frightened flight. Heart pounding, Jack grabbed a flashlight from the truck's cab. Something had crashed, and the way it cut through the night sky was unnatural. Without a second thought, he turned the ignition, coaxing the old engine to life, and sped along dirt roads in pursuit of the fallen object. Dust spiraled in the truck's headlights, and the night's stillness hung thick with the portent of discovery. At the crash site, the acrid stench of scorched metal filled the air. The Orion spear, once so sleek and imposing, now lay half-buried in churned soil. Flames licked around the edges of the crumpled hull. Jack killed the truck's engine and stepped out cautiously, the flashlight casting a pale beam across twisted plating. Amid the flickers of fire and sparks, the aft hatch hissed open, releasing a burst of steam. And there, silhouetted against the darkness, stood Commander Lyra and Lieutenant Saris, their imposing forms accentuated by battle armor. Jack froze. His heart hammered. He had never seen anyone like them. Regal, alien, fearsome. Lyra locked eyes with the unarmed man holding a flashlight. She raised a gauntlet hand, prepared to defend herself, but something about the man's stance gave her pause. There was no immediate threat in his expression, only shock, curiosity, and a flicker of concern. She exchanged a glance with Saris, who was equally surprised at the human's presence. For several heartbeats, an unspoken standoff held them in its grip, as though time itself hesitated. Then Lyra lowered her arm slightly. Her pride warned her not to rely on a stranger, let alone a man from a race her people barely regarded. Yet necessity urged her otherwise. Their ship was broken, Saris was injured, and emergency beacons might draw unwanted attention. Jack swallowed hard, the flashlight beam trembling in his grip. Something in Lyra's fierce gaze moved him to speak. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice unsteady but sincere. Lyra, breathing hard from exertion and adrenaline, hesitated. In the fleeting silence, she felt an unexpected shift in her chest, an unaccustomed stirring of doubt and curiosity. "We will manage," she said finally, each word measured. "But our ship." Jack took a cautious step forward, voice hushed in awe. "I might be able to help." It was in that moment, amid scorched farmland and the smoldering wreck of an alien vessel, that two unlikely worlds converged. Dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the crash site in pale light. Smoke still curled from the broken hull of the Orion spear, but the flames had subsided, leaving scorched metal and acrid vapors in their wake. Jack realized he had spent the remainder of the night dousing flames with an old fire extinguisher from his truck, meticulously checking for any further dangers. Though Lyra had kept her distance, ever alert for signs of treachery, she could not deny that his help had saved them from a far worse disaster. She had suspected Earth's inhabitants would be primitive, perhaps panicky, but Jack's calm resourcefulness defied her expectations. Even Saris, whose shoulder was wounded, found the humans' diligence oddly reassuring. By morning, the farmland no longer held the profound quiet of isolation. Jack understood that authorities might soon arrive if anyone else had seen the falling ship. He glanced at the battered vessel and then at the two alien women, both exuding a formidable presence. "We can't stay here," he said, scratching at the stubble on his chin. "People are bound to investigate." Lyra studied him, crossing her arms, still trying to mask the faint sting of her own bruised ribs. "We are aware," she replied curtly. "Our ship must be repaired, or at least concealed." Jack nodded, heading back to his truck. "There's an old barn on the edge of my uncle's property. He passed a few years ago, and no one goes there now. It has enough space for your ship, assuming we can tow it." "Towing an interstellar craft," Saris muttered, wincing in pain. We would be better off calling for a retrieval squad. Lyra pursed her lips. She had considered sending a distress signal, but the mission was intended to be covert. Further, a crash behind enemy lines was never ideal. Summoning Zyra Prime risked exposing the mission prematurely, and the Empire might well decide Earth required immediate conquest, or even sterilization, if threatened. We will proceed with the humans' plan, she decided, ignoring Ceres's disapproving glare. Jack scrounged for steel cables in the back of his truck. He looped them around the sturdiest portions of the ship's damaged chassis. Muscles bulged under his worn shirt as he tightened the cables, sweat beading along his brow. Lyra watched, impressed by his meticulous care. She had witnessed countless battles, studied advanced engineering, but she had rarely seen such raw practicality in action. With the barn only a few miles away, the journey was feasible, yet still precarious. Jack eased the truck forward, its tires digging into the soil as it strained against the weight. The truck roared, metal groaned, and inch by inch, the Orion's spear began to move. Lyra and Ceres walked alongside, pushing where possible, guiding the battered craft across uneven ground until it reached the overgrown driveway. They arrived at midday, the sun hanging high in a clear sky. The old barn stood silent, its flaking red paint nearly lost behind tall grass. Jack pried the doors open, the hinges protesting with a rusty squeal. Cobwebs drifted in the gloom, revealing dust motes swirling in a shaft of sunlight. Carefully, they maneuvered the ship inside, leaving just enough space to shut the doors behind it. Once inside, Lyra found a moment to check on Ceres's wound more thoroughly. Beneath her armor, the lieutenant's shoulder had taken a nasty gash from twisted metal. Though Zyrans possessed advanced healing capabilities, they still needed proper medical tools, or at least a brief respite. Jack noticed the pained expression on Ceres's face. Without a word, he retrieved a first aid kit from his truck, rummaging for antiseptic and bandages. Ceres eyed him warily, but Lyra inclined her head in silent approval. At least disinfect the wound, Jack suggested. This is probably primitive compared to what you have, but it's better than nothing. Ceres winced as he applied the antiseptic, but she bit back a retort. A part of her still wrestled with the notion that a human man was tending her injury, yet her stoicism overrode her pride. She watched Jack's focused expression, seeing not condescension but genuine concern. When he finished, Lyra stepped forward, speaking softly. "Thank you," she said, and the words tasted foreign on her tongue. Zyrans rarely thanked outsiders. Gratitude was reserved for feats of courage among their own. Yet, she sensed that the old ways might not fully apply here. Jack nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I'm just glad I can help. Once Ceres recovers enough for you both to help me, I'll see what I can do about the ship. I've never worked on alien tech, but if it's mechanical, I might figure something out." Commander Lyra regarded him, arms crossed, an unspoken question in her gaze. Why would this man help them at all? There was no direct benefit, no promise of reward. Still, the sincerity behind his dark eyes was undeniable. She found herself drawn to the puzzle he represented, feeling a flicker of curiosity that chipped away at her preconceived notions of humans. Days stretched into nights within that dusty barn, as Jack and Lyra labored side by side to restore the Orion's spear. Lieutenant Ceres mostly rested, her shoulder healing under the minimal care they could provide. She contributed where she could, especially in deciphering the advanced readouts that blinked erratically on the ship's consoles. The farm's seclusion proved beneficial, for no prying eyes ventured near. Jack's phone rang occasionally, mostly inquiries from local folks about whether he had noticed anything strange in the sky a few nights back. He feigned ignorance. A local law enforcement officer came sniffing around once, but a few half-truths sent him away with nothing substantial. Still, Jack remained vigilant, ever aware that discovery was only a misstep away. Inside the barn, a harsh overhead lamp cast long shadows across the hull of the Zyran ship. Dust mites drifted through the beam of light. Jack stood on a makeshift ladder, prying open a scorched panel. Sparks leaped out, and he nearly dropped his screwdriver. "We'll need new wiring," he muttered, scanning the labyrinthine network of cables within. "It's not too different from what we use in our machines, except it's way more compact, and it's got these weird crystalline conduits." Lyra stood below, arms folded, watching with an assessing gaze. She had removed her heavier armor, wearing only a form-fitting undersuit that allowed for easier movement. The crystals are star sapphire cores, she explained. They're grown in labs on Zyra Prime to conduct massive amounts of energy in minimal space. Earth's wiring might not handle the load if we simply patch it in. Jack frowned, descending the ladder to take a closer look at a shattered crystal cluster. If we can't replicate these crystals, he asked, is there any alternative? Saris, propped up on a stool in the corner, offered a half-hearted shrug. We might salvage some from other areas of the ship that aren't crucial to flight. Reroute what we can. But the power distribution must remain stable. Ever methodical, Lyra paced around the damaged vessel, a furrow creasing her brow. We only need enough to leave Earth's surface and re-establish contact with one of our cruisers. Once in orbit, we can be picked up. Jack paused, his gaze drifting to Lyra. You're leaving so soon? You crash here. You see everything Earth might offer, and that's it. Surprise flickered across Lyra's features. Our mission is reconnaissance, not colonization yet. Unless the High Council deems your world worthy of conquest. Her words carried a note of finality, yet Jack sensed a subtle tension beneath them. She spoke like a soldier following orders, but her eyes suggested she had tasted something unexpected. Earth's soil beneath her feet, the sense of camaraderie that came from working alongside a humble mechanic. These experiences were uncharted territory. For the next few hours, they toiled, removing damaged panels, redistributing the few intact crystals to vital systems. Jack's mechanical intuition meshed with Lyra's thorough knowledge of Zyran engineering. They operated in a silent rhythm, each anticipating the other's next move. The synergy of their teamwork defied the gulf between their worlds. At one point, Jack took a moment to catch his breath. He cleared his throat. Back on your planet, he ventured. What's life like? Are all of you warriors? Lyra paused, glancing up from a circuit board, her expression uncertain. No human had ever questioned her about Zyra Prime in such a direct, personal manner. Zyra Prime has thrived on conquest for centuries, she began. Our empire spans many star systems. The men of our species exist, of course, but the women wield power due to a historical line of warrior queens. By tradition, leadership and strategic roles fall to the females. The men tend to more domestic tasks or lesser council positions. To be frank, most Zyran men would find your independence unfamiliar. Jack nodded slowly, absorbing the cultural difference. And the conquest? You conquer worlds that stand in your way, I take it. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she held his gaze. We expand. It is how we have always ensured our survival, our prosperity. He set down a broken piece of plating with a soft clang. It sounds like that expansion doesn't leave much room for negotiation. Negotiation, Lyra echoed, tasting the word. There have been instances, yes, but rarely do weaker planets negotiate from a position of strength. Jack's brow furrowed, yet he carefully masked any outright judgment. He was talking to a commander of an empire that spanned galaxies. However backward or ruthless it sounded, he recognized that it was her norm. I see, he murmured, returning to the repairs. Well, not all Earth nations get along, but I hope you'll find something worth keeping alive here, not just conquering. She studied him, an unfamiliar emotion stirring in her chest. She recalled the High Council's directive, the single-minded pursuit of the Empire's goals. Yet, a small voice in the back of her mind wondered whether Earth might be different, whether there was more to be gained than subjugation. She did not voice these thoughts, but they lingered, fueling a subtle crack in her once impenetrable certainty. As the days extended into a week, Jack and Lyra found a curious sort of routine. He would venture into town for supplies, carefully avoiding suspicion. Sometimes he bought lengths of copper wire, insulating material, or new sets of tools. Other times, he returned with groceries for simple meals, which he prepared in the old farmhouse kitchen. Lyra and Saris would remain hidden within the barn, studying Earth's radio waves and news broadcasts using the ship's partially restored sensors. In the evenings, when a hush fell over the fields, the three of them shared cautious conversations. Saris spoke of the wars Zyra Prime had waged, the triumphs that elevated their empire. She recounted heroic tales of matriarchs past, warriors whose statues now guarded the great halls of Zyra's capital. Jack listened, occasionally interjecting with stories of Earth's own conflicts. Though, he admitted, humans were often their own worst enemies. Lyra found her perspective shifting with each passing story. She saw how the Zyran narrative cast them as valiant conquerors, bringers of order to chaotic worlds. But Jack's stories of Earth told of resilience, creativity, and the boundless capacity for cooperation. She found herself asking more questions, some gentle, others pointed. "What do your people do with conquered planets?" Jack asked one night, sitting on a wooden stool near the flickering lantern. His tone was calm, but his eyes were steady on Lyra. She hesitated. "We integrate them, if they are worthy," she replied. "They supply resources, technology, or labor. Sometimes we permit them to govern themselves under Zyran oversight. If they resist too strongly, we take more drastic measures." Jack's gaze dropped to the floor. His expression was grave as he processed her words. "And you think Earth might resist?" Lyra leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. "From what we've seen so far, your technology is behind ours. But I sense a tenacity here, a fierce spirit that might not bow easily." Saris nodded in agreement. "Your planet has faced many hardships, though your people are divided. We have intercepted your newscasts. Civil unrest in some regions, cooperation in others. You are neither wholly united nor entirely chaotic." Jack sighed, shoulders heavy with unspoken concern. "We do have our problems, but we also have our triumphs. If your empire decided to invade, I'd hate to see the destruction on both sides." His voice trailed off, and an uneasy silence settled over them. It was late that night when Lyra stepped outside the barn alone, craving the cool air. The moon hung low, illuminating the silent fields with a gentle glow. She surveyed the sky, recalling Zyra Prime's twin moons and the vantage they offered of her homeworld. Here on Earth, the moon looked solitary, yet somehow comforting. She found herself thinking of the families who must live in the nearby farmhouse, of children who might gaze at this same moon with wide-eyed wonder. She found Jack leaning against the barn wall, arms crossed over his chest. She startled slightly, having expected to be alone. His gaze flicked up, and he offered a small, lopsided smile. "Couldn't sleep," he said quietly. Lyra nodded in acknowledgement, letting the silence stretch. Eventually, Jack pushed away from the wall, stepping closer. "You know," he began, "I never quite believed I'd meet someone from another world. But if I had, I wouldn't have imagined you to be so human." She raised an eyebrow. "Human? How so?" He shrugged. "We're told stories of aliens as monsters, or cold, calculating creatures. But you worry about your lieutenant. You care about completing your mission. You're proud, but I see moments of compassion. And you've been patient with me." Lyra felt her cheeks flush, though she refused to avert her gaze. "We are conquerors, Jack, but we are still people. We laugh, we mourn, we bleed. We are not unfeeling machines." He nodded, footsteps scuffing against the dirt. "I suppose it's easy to forget that when you think of an entire empire coming to claim your world." She tilted her head, considering him. "I must confess," she said, "you have surprised me as well. Our men are rarely permitted roles that risk physical labor or strategic thinking, but you handle both with grace. You show kindness without expecting reward. It is unusual to me." A gentle breeze rustled the tall grass. They stood mere feet apart, separated by the swirling possibilities of what might come next. Lyra could not fully articulate the stirring within her, an unspoken connection, forming quietly, yet too significant to ignore. "There's a lot you haven't seen yet," Jack said softly. "Not just in me, but in all of us." She regarded him silently, a conflict playing out behind her silver eyes. Duty and empathy warred for supremacy. She remembered the High Council's directive and the unwavering traditions of her empire. But here, in the hush of an Earth night, she felt an unaccustomed desire to protect, not conquer. "We'll see," she replied, her tone thoughtful, not dismissive. And as they turned to re-enter the barn, the night sky stretched overhead like a vast tapestry, bearing silent witness to a moment that would shape the fate of two worlds. Far across the galaxy, on Zyra Prime, Supreme Matriarch Lyra paced in the High Council chamber. The intelligence from Earth was overdue, and worry etched lines into her regal features. She consulted the star charts and listened to the pulses of distant transmissions, but no word arrived from Commander Lyra. Illyria summoned the council to an emergency session. Commander Lyra's silence is alarming, she announced. Our invasion plans hinge on her report. If Earth proves valuable, we must strike quickly. If not, we must move on. One counselor, Elder Rissa, lifted her chin in defiance. The commander is capable. She may be gathering information. Let us be patient. Others murmured in uneasy agreement, yet Illyria's eyes glowed with suspicion. She had known Lyra since the commander's earliest victories. There was a steadfastness in Lyra's soul that once seemed unbreakable. Yet, if some unexpected force had compromised her, the consequences for the Empire could be dire. A task force must be sent, Illyria concluded, her voice echoing through the high columns. We cannot afford ignorance. Prepare a cruiser to depart immediately, one with enough firepower to raise Earth if necessary. Let them find Lyra, or learn her fate. A murmur of assent rose among the counselors. The Empire's engines of war stirred, forging a path through hyperspace. Unbeknownst to Earth, an inevitable confrontation was already underway, carried on the dark wings of Zyran ambition. Inside the barn, the final repairs were nearly complete. The makeshift solutions Jack had crafted, combined with Zyran ingenuity, had coaxed the Orion spear back to a semblance of functionality. The once damaged hull now gleamed with mismatched patches, a testament to interspecies cooperation. Lyra and Sarah stood before the central control console. Screens buzzed with lines of Zyran script, indicating partial reactor stability. We're nearly at full power, Sarah said, relief washing over her features. Commander, we can launch soon. Jack heard her words with mixed emotions. Part of him wanted them to succeed, to survive whatever awaited them. Yet another part of him felt a pang of loss, as if something vital was slipping away. He had grown close to these alien warriors, forging a bond in the unlikeliest of places. Lyra's gaze flicked from the console to Jack. If we depart, we'll contact our Empire. They will question the delay, the crash, the presence of your people. She trailed off, the weight of her duty pressing upon her. How could she explain that Earth had awakened a sense of protectiveness within her, that her loyalty to Zyra Prime was suddenly overshadowed by doubts? Saris, unaware of Lyra's internal struggle, continued pressing buttons. Commander, we must at least signal them, or they'll fear the mission has failed. We can gather reinforcements. Jack interjected, voice quiet. And then what? Reinforcements come, and Earth becomes part of your empire? Or worse, a battlefield? Lyra glanced sharply at him. It is not your decision, Jack. Her tone was sharper than intended, betraying the turmoil within. She was torn between the voice of duty in her mind and the stirring compassion in her heart. A sudden beep sounded from the console. Saris leaned forward, eyes widening. Commander, we're detecting a large Zyran cruiser entering the outer edges of this solar system. Their trajectory suggests they are searching for us. Lyra inhaled sharply. They must have decided to act on our absence. Jack looked between them, anxiety etched in his features. So, your people are already on their way. Saris scanned the readouts. Yes, and quickly. She paused, glancing at Lyra. Commander, if we do nothing, they will detect our signal in short order. Earth will become an open target. Silence cloaked them, thick with tension. Lyra's eyes locked on the flickering screens. Duty demanded they rejoin their empire, but a deeper instinct urged her to protect the world that had sheltered them in their time of need. Time was running out. News of Zyran activity in Earth's orbit might have gone unnoticed by the majority of humanity, but Lyra and Saris felt the presence of the cruiser in every fiber. Its advanced scanners could pinpoint the Orion spear if it came close enough. Commander Lyra wrestled with a decision that could alter the course of both civilizations. Late that night, under flickering lantern light, she gathered with Jack and Saris in the barn. The battered ship loomed behind them, silent yet potent with possibility. Lyra's voice was resolute, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. I cannot call them off easily. The Empire expects victory, or at least compliance. But perhaps there is another way. Saris blinked in confusion. Commander, what are you suggesting? Lyra's jaw tightened. If I inform the cruiser that Earth is worthless, ravaged by disease, or uninhabitable, the High Council might dismiss it. Our conquest would be delayed, perhaps indefinitely. Jack's hope rose, yet he detected her hesitation. But would they believe that? Saris shook her head, skepticism evident. The Empire trusts our word, but if they scan the planet themselves, they will see the truth. Also, lying to the High Council is treason. Lyra's expression hardened, a warrior's determination igniting in her gaze. Then we sabotage their scans, she declared. We can generate false data, make Earth appear toxic or destroyed. If we succeed, the cruiser might depart. Meanwhile, we can spread the truth discreetly among other Zyran soldiers who might question endless conquest. A seed of doubt could grow. Saris gaped. Commander, you speak of rebellion. We speak of survival, Lyra corrected, her voice low. I have seen enough here to realize that we do not have the right to simply tear this world apart. This planet has its flaws, but it also holds potential. We should not extinguish it. Jack took a step closer, heart pounding. I don't know how to thank you for that. But won't your empire punish you? Lyra mustered a wry smile. Punishment means little when weighed against the countless lives at risk. I will bear that burden. A tenuous plan began to form. Saris, though bound by loyalty, could not deny her commander's will. She grudgingly helped configure a system override in the Orion Spear. The plan was complex. Launch, pretend to rendezvous with the cruiser, feed them falsified sensor readings, and vanish in a hyperspace. Jack's role would be minimal, helping with last-minute mechanical support, but his presence was a steady reassurance that Earth was worth saving. On the eve of the launch, Lyra found Jack standing outside once more, leaning against the barn. The night air felt charged with impending destiny. She approached quietly, her silver hair glinting in the moonlight. So, this is it, he said softly, turning to face her. You're risking everything, your rank, your life, for us. She studied his rugged features, each line telling a story of struggle, tenacity, and kindness. In that moment, she realized how alien the concept of unselfish compassion had been to her before setting foot on Earth. You gave us sanctuary, she replied, voice hushed. You changed the way I see this planet, and perhaps the universe. I do this not solely for you, but for all those who deserve a chance to thrive without conquest. Jack's breath caught, and for a heartbeat, words failed him. Then, in a moment that defied all logic and spanned all distance, he reached out, cupping her cheek. Her eyes fluttered closed, just for an instant, as his warmth touched her. No grand declarations needed to be spoken. In that simple gesture, a bond was formed that transcended any empire. She stepped back after a moment, a pink flush coloring her cheeks. We must be ready, she said, the faintest tremor in her voice. He nodded, swallowing hard. Right. Whatever happens, thank you. They parted under the quiet glow of the moon, uncertain of what dawn would bring, but certain of the choice they had made. At first light, the Orion Spear roared to life. With Jack's final tweaks, the engines hummed, straining against gravity. The barn doors swung wide, nearly torn from their hinges, as the ship lifted into the sky. Dust billowed out in swirling eddies. Jack shielded his eyes, watching as Lyra piloted the craft with renewed vigor, Saris at her side. Up above the clouds, the earth curved beneath them, a mosaic of blue oceans and green land masses. It was a sight that never failed to humble Jack whenever he saw it in photographs. Now, he only wished Lyra and Saris success. The Zyran cruiser, an imposing behemoth bristling with weaponry, loomed just outside Earth's orbit. Its communications array was already primed, scanning for any sign of the lost scout vessel. As the Orion Spear emerged, a crisp signal sliced across the void. Commander Lyra, you are ordered to dock immediately, came a stern voice over the comm channel. Lyra recognized it as High Captain Taris, one of the Empire's most formidable officers. Fingers dancing over the console, Saris sent back a carefully orchestrated stream of false data, painting Earth as a lifeless, contaminated rock. Lyra responded in a steady voice, laced with subtle tension. Hi, Captain Taris. It is good to hear your voice. We have encountered catastrophic conditions. This planet is toxic, unsalvageable. There was a pause on the other end. Explain, Commander, Taris demanded. This contradicts initial intelligence. Saris jammed the override into the ship's sensor arrays, broadcasting illusions of nuclear fallout, decimated ecosystems, and lethal radiation levels across Earth's atmosphere. On the cruiser, Taris's own instruments would confirm the data, seeing not the living, breathing world below, but a scorched wasteland. Lyra's heart hammered. We nearly perished upon landing, she lied, but managed to escape. Recommend immediate withdrawal. This planet offers no resources to justify the risk of contamination. The comm crackled. I see. Commander, you are ordered to dock, so we may retrieve you. Then we depart. Lyra clenched her teeth. The plan required them to feign docking, then slip away at the last moment. She angled the Orion spear closer to the cruiser, careful to maintain their ruse. As the massive hangar doors loomed, she felt an almost overwhelming urge to accelerate. They had moments before someone aboard the cruiser might question the data or verify the planet visually. Commander, prepare to engage docking clamps, Taris's voice commanded. Lyra's gaze darted to Saris, who nodded. Together, they initiated the final sequence of the sabotage. Instead of sealing with the cruiser's airlock, the Orion spear flicked into an evasive trajectory, bursting away with a sudden thrust of energy. Alarms blared across the comm channel. Commander Lyra, you are disobeying a direct order. Explain yourself. Taris's voice thundered. Lyra's breathing was ragged. Forgive me, she whispered, though she never pressed the comm button. Then, with a flash of the engines, the Orion spear vanished into the swirling maelstrom of hyperspace, leaving the cruiser behind with only illusions of devastation. Within minutes, the Orion spear re-emerged from hyperspace in a hidden orbit around the far side of Earth's moon. The plan was risky, but the cruiser would hopefully assume they had jumped back toward Zyra Prime, carrying news of Earth's toxicity. With any luck, Taris would depart, forging a false report that would delay an invasion indefinitely. Yet, Lyra knew the ruse might not last forever. Zyran scouts could stumble upon Earth, or more suspicious minds might question the conflicting intelligence. But for now, Earth was safe, given a precious window of time. And within that time, perhaps the seeds of change could take root in the Empire itself. Commander, Saris said quietly, we have succeeded, but we are now exiles. Lyra exhaled a trembling breath, facing her lieutenant. We are alive, and Earth remains free. That is enough for now. They set a course to land discreetly, far from the original crash site. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere once more, Lyra felt a tug in her chest. She had defied her home, her people. She had risked her entire future. For what? A growing certainty that no one had the right to extinguish a world like Earth. The thought of seeing Jack again lent courage to her weary heart. Under the cover of night, the Orion spear touched down in a deserted clearing, shielded by tall pines. A soft hum accompanied the landing struts as they extended. Lyra wasted no time, scanning the area for any sign of watchers. Once satisfied, she and Sarah stepped out into the moonlight, weapons at the ready, though they hoped never to use them. Jack arrived soon after, alerted by a covert signal Lyra had managed to send from orbit. He navigated his old truck through a winding dirt trail, headlights slicing through the darkness until they landed on the silvery hull of the newly returned ship. Relief and joy warred in his expression as he climbed out of the cab. You're back, he said, voice trembling with emotion. I was worried your cruiser might, Lyra stepped forward, arms dropping to her sides, lips curving into a smile she could no longer suppress. We fooled them, at least for now. The invasion is postponed, if not averted. Jack closed the distance, and though a million questions danced in his eyes, he simply said, thank you. You risked everything. A gentle tension crackled between them. She nodded, finding words inadequate, and reached for his hand. He held it gingerly, as though fearing to break a fragile bond. Saris observed from a few steps away, still grappling with the enormity of what had transpired. So what now? Jack asked, voice low, eyes never leaving Lyra's. Lyra squared her shoulders, exhaling slowly. We remain, at least for some time. The cruiser will depart, bearing false data, and Earth will fade from the Empire's immediate concerns. But we cannot be sure the threat is gone forever. Saris chimed in, her tone subdued. We could attempt to contact others who might share our doubts about endless conquest. Slowly build an alliance. In time, we might sway enough minds to spare worlds like Earth. Lyra nodded, hope sparking anew. Yes, a rebellion of sorts. One that questions the old ways, that believes in cooperation over domination. Jack looked between them, pride and admiration lighting his features. You're talking about changing an entire empire. That's incredible. And you think that's possible? Lyra lifted her chin. We are warriors. We do not surrender easily. That includes the fight for a better future. The moment crystallized under the soft glow of the moon. They were three souls bound by loyalty, forged in crisis. The path ahead lay shrouded in uncertainty, but the cause united them, transcending the boundaries of species or tradition. For perhaps the first time in her life, Commander Lyra felt entirely free to choose, to strive, to protect. She clasped Jack's hand firmly, resolution shining in her eyes. We fight for Earth, she said, and her voice resonated through the stillness, a vow that would echo across stars. Weeks turned into months. The Orion spear, repaired and concealed beneath clever camouflage, became a nexus of clandestine activity. Through coded signals, Lyra and Ceres reached out to trusted allies on remote Zyran outposts, women who had once questioned the Empire's ceaseless expansions. Quietly, messages were exchanged, seeds of rebellion sown. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued with an uncanny normalcy. Farmers harvested crops, children went to school, and distant nations bickered over their perpetual squabbles. Little did they know that two alien warrior women had chosen to safeguard their world at the cost of high treason. Lyra found herself more entrenched in Earth life than she ever anticipated. She ventured into small towns with Jack, disguised in inconspicuous clothing, quietly absorbing the nuances of human culture. She marveled at simple acts of kindness, neighbors helping neighbors, volunteers assisting the needy. Yes, the planet harbored strife, prejudice, and endless political discord, but it also shone with empathy and resilience. Jack introduced her to modest pleasures, a slice of homemade pie at a local diner, the hush of a quiet lake at sunset, the distant twinkle of a starry sky, free from cosmic warfare. Each new experience braided itself into the tapestry of Lyra's evolving worldview. She was no longer just a commander upholding the Empire's edicts. She was a guardian, a learner, a friend. Even Ceres, though she missed the rigid discipline of Zyra Prime, found an odd satisfaction in Earth's simpler pace. She spent long hours studying transmissions, forging contact with those who might join the budding rebellion. When doubts crept in, she reminded herself of the day Jack had tended her wounds, or the nights spent listening to Earth's music, strangely soothing in its variety. Bit by bit, her old convictions shifted, growing in empathy. Rumors of the poisoned planet eventually reached the Council's ears. The High Council accepted the cruiser's official report, labeling Earth as a fruitless curiosity. Supreme Matriarch Lyra turned her attention to other galactic frontiers, unwittingly granting the conspirators time to organize. A kernel of mistrust lingered in her mind about Lyra's disappearance, but without concrete evidence of betrayal, she pursued other matters. Thus, a fragile peace enveloped Earth. Lyra, Jack, and Ceres operated in the shadows, gathering small victories. Their transmissions found receptive ears among certain Zyran officers, who questioned the moral cost of infinite conquest. In secret, these dissidents spread the word, forging alliances that might someday alter the Empire's trajectory. One crisp autumn evening, Lyra and Jack strolled together along a remote country road. Leaves swirled, painted in warm oranges and reds. Lyra wore a lightweight jacket, her silver hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Jack held her hand, their fingers intertwined. For once, the threat of impending doom felt distant. When I first saw your ship, he said, voice soft, I imagined only destruction. But now, I see the future is unpredictable. You've given me hope that we can shape it for the better. She gazed up at him, a gentle warmth in her eyes. And you have shown me that compassion transcends boundaries I once believed unbreakable. In the distance, a rusty pickup drove past, its headlights illuminating the pair for a moment. In that fleeting light, one might have seen just two ordinary people sharing a quiet evening. Yet, beneath the surface, theirs was a bond forged against galactic adversity, a partnership that might one day remake empires. They paused near a small lake, where moonlight shimmered across rippling water. Jack tugged Lyra closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. The night air was cool, but her heart was warm with contentment. Thoughts of Zyra Prime flitted through her mind, its stark architecture, its reverence for power. She felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she had chosen a different path, one that was, in her eyes, truly worthy of a warrior. Her communicator buzzed softly, a coded message from Ceres, likely an update on the rebellion's slow yet steady progress. Lyra silenced it for a moment. Tonight, she would savor a moment of peace, grounding herself in the very world she had come to cherish. Jack turned to face her fully, his expression earnest, eyes reflecting the silvery glow of the moon. "Lyra," he whispered, lifting a hand to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. "I know everything's uncertain, but whatever happens next, I'm here. I'll stand beside you." A tender smile curved her lips. She leaned in, closing the gap, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. The simple act spoke volumes. Neither needed words to confirm the bond that had grown from the night he found her among the wreckage, alien and formidable. In this quiet exchange, they acknowledged the journey they had walked together and the one they would continue, come what may. Beyond Earth's horizon, countless stars gleamed, each a reminder that the universe was vast, and their struggles were but one thread in a cosmic tapestry. Yet, in that grand sprawl of galaxies and empires, hope had sprouted in the unlikeliest of places, within the heart of a warrior commander and a humble mechanic. And so, under a moonlit sky, they chose to believe in a future shaped by unity rather than conquest, by empathy rather than domination. It was a simple, powerful choice, one that promised more than mere survival. It offered the chance for two worlds, once set on a path of invasion and subjugation, to find a destiny intertwined by respect, discovery, and a love that soared beyond all boundaries. Thus did Commander Lyra, once a proud instrument of the Zyran Empire, and Jack, a steadfast mechanic from Earth, forge a lasting alliance, a quiet pledge that, together, they would strive to ensure their story ended not in war, but in the possibility of a happier tomorrow for all. The end, it seemed, was only the beginning.